Issue 247. We start out with narration telling us that the Death Egg had landed in the Arctic tundra a few days ago for repairs and restocking. One of the Arctic freedom fighters lampshades to Sonic that Eggman's acting so cautiously, and says that they must have really struck fear into him. Sonic smirks at that and says that they've chased him all over the planet and now he's cornered and there's no distractions this time. This would have held true if the comic was written well. Instead, executive meddling kicked in, and you'll see. Tails explains that the T-Pup has a tornado prepared for not only takeoff, but also keeping Mecha Sally disabled. And they've got someone working on the next step back home. And the text blurb just says last issue instead of telling us who that person is, or what that next step could possibly be. I have a question. If T-Pup can disable Mecha Sally, why didn't he get sent to her to do that a long time ago? Why didn't he, paralyze and electrocute her like he did with Silver Sonic? That's so stupid. That's another Mecha Sally stall that was so subtle, but that doesn't mean that's gonna slip past my radar. Then we see Amy finally wearing something different for once, as she's wearing a pretty new long sleeve dress that Irma loaned her. And there's some humor with Sonic lampshading that she's colder than him when she's wearing the most out of all of them. And Amy says that girls just get cold really easily. The heroes are all waiting for Irma's signal that she's cut the bunker's alarms to prevent Eggman from knowing they're here. Remember, Irma was the girl I was suspecting of betraying the Arctic heroes eventually because she was a complete jerk to Sonic and expressed resentment over coming back here to fight Eggman. So is the comic gonna have an interesting twist following up on that where she betrays the team? No, of course not. Instead, she shows them an image of Eggman, which is the signal for all of them to run in. Sonic spin dashes his way through a metal wall, not hurting himself from it. And as we see Irma pulling some wires, they're all shocked at seeing Silver the Hedgehog grabbing some robots to help. Sonic is naturally full of resentment at seeing him again, saying, "You," because the traitor notion got old real fast as he lampshades. So okay, if Inflin knows that a concept of his has gotten old, since it's been dragged out since, the 190s, that just makes it all more infuriating that he's dragged it out for this long, because he should know better then. Silver isn't listened to, and says that he got outside help to figure out who the traitor is. Tails correctly guesses that it was Elias because he saw him leaving with Lyco and Lena earlier. But, one, no, it wasn't Elias, it was Director Who. Why is he acting like he's right? And two, this still doesn't make much sense because he never saw Elias with Silver. Tails asks Sonic to trust them, and he does. Silver recaps to us and says that their team is already fallen apart like history has predicted. When he says that Sally's the traitor, even though she blatantly has no free will and isn't responsible for any of her actions right now, everyone's rightfully furious with him. Fortunately, they get held back from attacking him as he explains that he's here to save Sally, having conveniently changed his mission. I guess Harvey, Who, and Elias convinced him to do that. It would have been nice to see that. Meanwhile, Nicole says that as her first act since her return to the city, what took her so long? She's presenting to people the newly restored Castle Acorn. Why Ixis didn't just make a temporary Castle Acorn with his crystal magic, I have no fucking clue. And I like how she smiles nervously here. And I love that we get to see her again, actually have a proper subplot at all in this issue. I thought it'd just be the Death Egg. Rotor lampshades that people never should have doubted her to begin with. And I'm guessing what'll happen next is that Tails will immediately destroy the castle, or at least destroy it later, and this will cause people to lose faith in her because she somehow couldn't prevent that from happening when she can sense specific people in the city. Not to mention, she can magically prevent castles from crumbling, and prevent other things from crumbling, because she can control the city because it's made of nanites. She then wonders why Jeffrey isn't here to keep up appearances for Ixis, and Rotor says that the less they see of those two, the better. Nicole tells a weirdly drawn Rotor that they shouldn't be heartless about Ixis dying, even though he's pure evil, and she says that she's been working on a device he commissioned to help him, but she may not have completed it in time. Her idealism getting the better of her, she's gonna regret this. Rotor lampshades that she's too kind for her own good, but then the castle gets cracked by pink lightning, and Nicole complains that something's interfering with the nanites. Coding is being erased, signals are being jammed, and some are self-destructing. And this can't be happening because of Ixis, because then we'd see crystals everywhere. Rotor puts his hand on her reassuringly as she says that she managed to stabilize the Matrix, and she'll fix it when she figures out what's going on. Cheese brings Cream the Tails doll in the crowd, and Cream complains that she's trying to take care of the doll and find its owner, but it keeps disappearing. Why is she scolding a doll for disappearing? She has to know that a mere doll can't disappear on its own and wouldn't deserve to be scolded for it, right? That's hardly fair. Finally, she figures out that the doll always disappeared around the same time that buildings collapsed. She looks scared, plays it smart by telling Cheese to bring the doll home instead of openly saying in front of it that she knows what it's all about, and warns Rotor about what's going on. Thank God, while she lampshades how silly her explanation sounds, Rotor is strong or savvy enough to believe her. Rotor says he's going to do something about the doll, and logic would dictate that he would immediately tell Nicole to stick the nanites on the doll and turn it into complete stuffing, utterly destroying it in seconds when his guard is down. So I'm assuming that won't be allowed to happen because that would make sense, and be anticlimactic, which Flynn hates, and involve the characters acting logically to take care of a threat before it can become a huge problem. And the writing of the Iron Queen saga proves that's just not how things work anymore. Things have to be stretched out so that it can be fully defeated in a climactic way that makes no sense. Silver explains that his problem was that he assumed the traitor meant to destroy the team. How could he not assume that? It's called a traitor. Traitors by definition do it on purpose. He lampshades that maybe history just lost the details on why Sally turned against the team. How the hell could that happen? How the hell could history forget that Sally was roboticized? You'd think that if that was the case, then everyone would remember a robot or a Robian causing trouble, and not remember it as a traitor to a team. This is so dumb. This was obviously pulled out of his ass. I guarantee you the Mecha Sally couldn't have been even a twinkle in Flynn's eye when he first thought up the traitor concept. I bet he originally planned that he would turn out to be completely wrong about everything, but instead they try to awkwardly finagle a way to make him right but not right, which makes no fucking sense that his future would ever think that Sally was the traitor. I guarantee you that he didn't have this idea from the very start of the traitor idea. I mean, maybe he did, but it feels like just total asshole. Amy Lampshade said she's not a traitor because she didn't betray them intentionally, and Irma tries to be the writer's mouthpiece, having us believe that this all makes sense, as we're expected to believe that the future wouldn't even know that roboticization existed. Yeah, that makes sense. Something as horrifying as someone being turned into a robot with no free will to serve a mad scientist would totally be lost to the sands of time. No, that's the kind of stuff that, at the very worst, like myths and legends would be written about to continue for all time. Sonic, still in a tranquil fury, fortunately is written well enough to reluctantly say Silver and him are cool as long as he helps out. The Arctic Freedom Fighter team is going to cover them while Sonic and his friends look for the princess. Silver is asked by suspicious Amy how he knew they'd even be here, and Silver just says that he's psychic, which he technically is, but not that kind. That's a clever lie. It's a shame he's so obviously nervous that Amy's still suspicious. One of the Arctic Freedom Fighters had scouted ahead and found an underwater troop tunnel leading straight from the bunker they're in to the Death Egg, and with the alarms down and the forces here destroyed, they can sneak in. Then Sonic complains about walking down a rickety pipe under so much water, being afraid of potentially being drowned. One of them advises them to be quiet because the whale group outside might hear them. Silver uses his powers to light the dark tunnel up, but unfortunately the whales attack, so I guess his telekinesis that somehow creates light was loud enough for them to hear it. As one of the cyborg whales bursts through the pipe, Irma says that they're surrounded and tells the swimmers to cover them, and orders Silver to get the rest of them to Death Egg with his telekinesis. At least she hasn't been really rude yet this issue, but it makes her feel out of character. There's no explanation that she got character development to become a nicer person. Sonic refuses to get sidelined and tells Tails to hold his breath like he does as the two jump onto the top of a whale and attack it underwater. The whale realizes that Silver's power is the one that ruined the whales' hold on the walruses. Eggman gave all of his cyborg whales that difficult to get power? He orders the other whales to all aim for Silver, who cries out, and the heroes all escape from the water, climbing up to a metal floor. Sonic says that the stealthy approach is out then, but I guess he's not getting mad at Silver because his telekinesis isn't useful enough to be worth the convenience here. Instead, he's cheerful and tells everyone to smash some badniks, even though there aren't any badniks here. Robots maybe, but not badniks. Those were all destroyed. Orbot tells Eggman that they're being invaded, showing him security camera footage, and Eggman is furious because he just got the Death Egg fully repaired. He orders Mecha Sally to attack the lower decks, and Eggman, or rather Ian Flynn, pushes his concept of the Genesis Wave down your throat as Eggman says that they've got to set off the Genesis Wave now. Why? I mean, Eggman wants help from Wily, and I guess he's taking Sonic seriously enough as a threat, being so cautious that he'd think he'd need his help, and he doesn't want another repeat of issue 200 again. But the whole interdimensional crossover thing comes out of nowhere, since the executives just dropped down Flynn's lap to randomly force it out of nowhere with no real warning ahead of time. And so it feels extremely out of place as a result, considering everything that's happened before this point. We don't see Eggman meeting with Wily by sheer coincidence before he starts talking about using him for his plan in the actual comic. So this all comes out of nowhere and feels very forced. But at least this time, maybe I can put the blame on the executive meddling, forcing the crossover to happen. Except no, Flynn had no reason not to show us Eggman meeting Wily to start us off. So the concept still feels forced thanks to him, and because it leads to the reboot, I still despise it. Then we see Mecha Sally telling some robots behind her to do cover fire regardless of any collateral damage. I really have to wonder how she's expected to win against all the freedom fighters at once. I mean, come on, she's just one person, even if she was an upgraded robot. Even Metal Sonic was effortlessly beaten by Sonic a whole bunch of times. I'd have a hard time believing she'd win against Sonic, who can create tornadoes with super speed and smacker her with it. But with other characters like Tails and Amy also ganging up on her, come on, is she really that powerful? I mean, she should be attacked from the side and from behind a whole bunch. Anyways, Mecha Sally attacks Amy, Augustus shields Irma from some robots shooting lasers and cries out in pain, and Sonic grabs Mecha Sally's hands with spinny feet below her, saying that she's coming home. This is forced because you really should remember by now that she can fire a laser out of her head, which she proceeds to charge up, saying that he's giving her a point-blank shot. The smart thing for Sonic to do would be to run around her in a tornado to throw her up in the air and hit her in the head to knock her out, not to grab her hands. It's the dumbest thing to do, that's the dumbest thing to do for any enemy ever. I mean, what does he expect to accomplish grabbing her hands? He can't do anything against her like that. He can't punch her like that. But anyways, Sonic really should have just spin dashed at her head right away to knock her out at super speed. Instead of grabbing her hands, leaving both of his hands completely occupied and unable to do anything. His whole problem was that he's holding back, trying not to kill her, forgetting that she's a tough robot. Then we see Cream confronting the Tails doll with Team Freedom at the power plant. Idiotically, the heroes all decide to just stand there, waiting for Nicole and Cream to pointlessly call the robot out what he's been doing. Again, this is written like a bad fanfiction. If they were running on logic, Nicole would have immediately used her nanites to completely destroy the Tails doll before anything like this could happen. But instead, the comic's written like we're complete idiots. So that arbitrarily doesn't happen, giving the Tails doll a chance to start growing, powering up, as it says his objective is to release radioactive waste into the city by destroying power scrubbers. It changes into a giant monster, all because the characters were written like complete idiots and talked to an evil robot and didn't stop it in time. Meanwhile, Sonic dodges the laser from Metal Sally's head because somehow, when he let go of her hands to dodge it, she let go as well instead of holding him still. And this allows Tails to push him out of the way because of that ridiculous Deus Ex Machina. How is this issue good? Seriously, I can't be positive about this. An explosion is caused. Suddenly, Sonic and Tails are lying on the floor for some reason because they didn't bother to get up and attack her earlier. And Silver, fortunately, prevents Mecha Sally from winning right then and there, with his long overdue telekinesis disabling her. Now, if the comic was written well, this would be the end right here, as with Metal Sally disabled, they would go out of the Death Egg with her, and that would be that. But instead, because of complete bullshit, because of meta factors, there's a whiteout as a time shift happens. Also, Silver immediately recognizes it as a time shift before anything related to time could happen. I'm absolutely simmering just typing this review because it's so obviously badly written. And yet I'm sure tons of people have overlooked all of its flaws because this mess was written by Ian Flynn and the art is better than the pre-Flynn issues. And Sonic had no excuse for forgetting about her head laser when that was a very significant and memorable attack from her multiple times. That's basically her whole gimmick aside from flying. Silver should have grabbed her right away with his powers and flew out of the Death Egg with her to get home, letting the heroes do their thing. And we could have immediately cut to Sally being deroboticized and Antoine waking up and Bunny coming back home. No, I don't care if it wouldn't be climactic enough because it would happen too fast. There is no too fast. It could have made sense to happen quickly. Instead, the comic is totally distracted because the damn crossover has to happen now, despite the giant Tails doll and the Mecha Sally arc being very obvious dangling plot threads because the writers lost the rights to everything between this issue and the crossover. And that's not even mentioning the fact that the solution Nicole is working on for Ixis isn't at all explained, so we'll never know what she was talking about. She could have at least told us about it, but no. Even the Tails doll problem was horribly written because with the amount of power Nicole had as Iron Nicole, there's no reason whatsoever that she shouldn't have been able to destroy the Tails doll the second that Cream warned her about it. We're never told what the limits are for her now. If she needs to be close to it, she could just teleport there, or maybe even just walk or take a car there if she had to. We don't know how much time they had to get to it. Then all she'd have to do is make the nanites destroy the Tails doll with, I don't know, fire or giant crushing hands, and there you go. And even if we're supposed to believe that she can't do this because the city has new limits on her powers, destroying her usefulness, so she can't even so much as create a cage for the Tails doll or render it unable to move, first of all, we were never explicitly told what she's now unable to do, thanks to the city limits on her. I want you to show me a line where they say Nicole can't destroy or imprison stuff at a distance anymore. So it's a giant plot hole. And even if this was the logic they were working on, it still falls apart because the heroes all show up to the Tails doll and just fucking stand there like idiots, letting two different characters waste time talking to a robot and let the robot waste time talking. When if they were acting like actual people would, instead of politely listening to the robot talking, they would have just immediately attacked the robot with its guard down while talking and destroyed it, without giving it any sort of time to do a giant transformation. The heroes are made to act like complete and utter morons, just for the sake of forcing the concept of Tails doll going giant to happen. And you know, that didn't even need to be happening. Like, the Tails doll could have immediately been giant the minute that the heroes showed up, and it wouldn't have been nearly as frustrating, because it wouldn't have felt like it was the heroes' fault that the Tails doll got a chance to be giant in the first place. And it would have been perfectly acceptable if Cream hadn't figured it all out in time and warned the heroes. As stupid as it is, Nicole not figuring it all out immediately from her knowledge of the city. Then again, if the heroes hadn't been warned of the Tails doll from Cream finally figuring out in a moment of enjoyable smartness from her, then the Tails doll would have destroyed the power plant without it being guarded. I have a question, why the hell wasn't it ordered to do that the instant it showed up in the Nanite City? Why was it just doddering around, destroying random buildings for no reason? And I refuse to believe that Silver's future wouldn't remember that the traitor wasn't a traitor and was a roboticized member of the Freedom Fighters. They'd never forget something like roboticization. If anything, it'd make more sense for them not to remember that the heroes were destroyed by Sally, but instead remember that they were destroyed by a mere robot who looks like her. Or not even remember who it was that destroyed them. Because if the future doesn't remember what roboticization is, somehow, how the hell would they come to the conclusion that the robot was once a normal person and member of the Freedom Fighters? Why would they ever call her a traitor? It'd make more sense for it to be Fiona who was the traitor, although I doubt that she would actually try to kill all of them, especially by herself. She's already been written badly enough. The more you question the plot, the more it falls apart. Almost nothing about this issue works. Nothing. I tried to remember it as, like, no, like, this isn't so bad. I came back to reading this, and I came back to reading the script, and I was thinking, well, maybe this isn't as bad as I remembered it to be. Maybe I was just bitter from reviewing the comic, but no. It's especially aggravating to me because as I was typing this, I just finished my video on Sonic Universe issue 13 just that morning, and it just made it all the more glaring to me just how much of the writing fell apart since then. Universe issue 13 is a perfectly fine, if not great, story, and this is just a mess. And And the worst part is, the absolute worst part is, because the crossover just had to happen now, the worst possible timing, we are left with well over 31, possibly over 50 dangling plot threads that will never be resolved, which I guarantee you is a million times worse than the situation that Flynn picked up the comic from in the first place. Maybe the crossover's written fine, maybe it's good on its own. I don't really care. Its timing was absolutely atrocious. Even ignoring the fact that having a crossover with a completely different fucking franchise was absolutely unnecessary. They could have done it as its own separate special that didn't have to be canon. Like, they could have done it like we had every other crossover, with just one big special issue and that's it. Instead of being a complete distraction that ends the comic on a giant disgrace to its decades-long legacy by ending on a massive amount of cliffhangers. People complain about Sadie M's cliffhanger, but I bet it's got nothing on this. I would have been alright with the crossover if it took place well after the reboot, but instead executives got greedy and pushed it too early, making it the Death Egg madness all over again. We have over 50 dangling plot threads. The most major ones being that Ixis has possessed Jeffrey looking for a better body, the Tails doll is gonna attack the Nanite City, Mecha Sally hasn't been de-roboticized yet, Bunny hasn't returned to the gang with cybernetics, and Antoine hasn't woken up. You'll notice with the exception of the first two, all of these could have been resolved in literally one issue. Antoine wakes up, that's one panel. Bunny returns home and Nicole's overjoyed, that's one panel. Maybe four for her explaining how she got her cybernetics back, but she could have explained all that in one big text bubble in one panel. Tails doll's attack required just one more subplot, just one more issue, and it would have been resolved. But none of this was. That's not Penders's fault, that's Flynn's for choosing not to resolve them in time by postponing extremely far instead of just wrapping stuff up faster. That's why the reboot angers me. If you want to start a new comic, finish the old one first. I think Flynn needed a grumpy mother to come up to him and say, no, clean up your old toys first, then you can play with your new ones. So naturally I don't want to immediately continue up to the middle of some other comic just to follow along the Sonic comic and go over to a crossover arc I couldn't give two shits about. So here's how it's gonna work for me, alright? Starting with Sonic Universe issue 49, the comic branches off into two completely different continuities. And this one here is the Mega Man Sonic crossover continuity. Sure, there's references to past issues in there with Mecha Sally being referenced in the crossover, but Sonic said that Eggman has an identical past to Robotnik up to a certain point, so an alternate dimension or a multiverse sharing some similarities in its history with one we're familiar with isn't that far-fetched at this point. Basically, the minute that the Mega Man crossover starts, it starts because of the Genesis wave, at which point the multiverse is multiplied by 2 by the Genesis wave, the reboot being a new, entirely separate continuity, while the actual comic continuity lives on and we're just not allowed to see it under Flynn. Again, this isn't that far-fetched of an assumption with the fantasy series. It's not that different from Zelda, where the timeline branched off into 3, not just 2, with the third timeline where Link died in Ocarina of Time being of a really confusing, unexplained origin that wasn't as good of an explanation for a timeline split as the Genesis wave. Bear with me here, but I'm focusing on the actual comic continuity. And do you know where that continues? In Archie Sonic Online! That's right, there's a fan comic of this. Just like with Fleetway Sonic, at least this way I can get some resolution. The real comic continues on to Archie Sonic Online, and the other continuity continues on to the Mega Man crossover. It should be obvious what I'm going to continue with next time. I'll do the reboot eventually.